Good afternoon, everyone. Hope things are well, and I hope you are looking forward to tomorrow's match. Of course, we have the early kickoff against Bournemouth at St James's Park in what is a crucial game for us. Again, I've stated it a few times, but if Newcastle can beat Bournemouth tomorrow, we're going to be 7 points clear of potentially a 7th to 8th spot in the league. So Newcastle really will have European football firmly in their hands, and then of course, we can focus on potentially getting back to the Carabao Cup final and just solidifying what has been a much better season from Newcastle. It hasn't been flawless, but the last month or so we have completely changed things around. And of course, with the transfer window open now, there is plenty of news to talk about. And you guys want to hear about it. So I'm here today, as always, to tell you about it. If you are new around here and you enjoy watching this content, make sure to get down there, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my uploads. Of course, the match tomorrow, and we'll be bringing videos out throughout the transfer month. And secondly, make sure to smash our like button. But we're going to start off with some media comments. Again, you guys are a bit hit and miss and whether you like yelling about these media comments, but this one got a big reaction out of me yesterday, and I feel like it's interesting to talk about actually because Karen Carey comes out during the Manchester United game and she just says Newcastle United are only where we are now because of Alexander Isak. Now, I think when you hear or say that comment at face value, I wouldn't necessarily say that she's wrong because obviously Isak scored all those goals and Newcastle wouldn't be currently where we are now if Isak hasn't scored those goals. But I would argue, I think it's very disrespectful towards Eddie Howe and disrespectful towards the players and we as a football club. Because, I mean, if Isak was playing for Southampton, if he was playing for Leicester, if he was playing for any team he had a button, would they be in the top four? No. I would argue, if we're going to go based off players, I would argue Sandro Tonali is a key aspect of why Newcastle is currently in the top four. So I wouldn't just say it's Isak. I would obviously say Tonali's a big part. Obviously, Eddie Howe is a manager. He coaches the players. He organises the tactics. And you can't just say one player is the reason why Newcastle's in the top four. Absolute rubbish. Now, I'm sick of these media comments now, right? Yes, okay, you can come out the media and say what you want. I'm not telling these individuals to say that, but they're just so negative towards Newcastle. Again, there's no way Karen sits down every single week and watches Newcastle now because that comment completely confirms to me that she doesn't watch Newcastle. She basically will look at the stats and go, well, actually, well, Isak's got all these goals, he's got all these assists, he's the reason why Newcastle's there. I don't believe for 1 second she sits down and actually analyses and watches Newcastle now. I think it was absolutely rubbish. And when I heard that yesterday, it properly done my head in. I can't lie, it did do my head in. But I would also say comments like that is a good thing towards Newcastle. Let's let these media individuals, let these journalists, whoever it may be, let every single one of these individuals underlook Newcastle. Let them continue to not believe Newcastle are going to do it. So Newcastle can take it one game at a time without journalists, without media personnel just jumping on Newcastle. Let's be able to filter around the background, just do our job, and let's allow these people to keep doubting us because then Newcastle won't have as much pressure. We can just go out there and play our game. But yeah, I do not agree with that comment at all. Absolute rubbish. But yeah, apologies if you didn't want me to start the video like that. We do have a lot of transfer news to get into. But again, when these comments come out, I feel like we should call it out because I didn't agree with that one. But I'm going into the game more. Let's talk about our players first before we talk about potential incomings. Of course, Almiron's the big one. We mentioned yesterday that it's already sorted to Atlanta. And according to Eddie Howe's press conference, it certainly feels that way. If you look at these quotes now, he blames a lot of it on PSR. It says that he doesn't necessarily want to do it, but he will play tomorrow, Miggy, or you'll at least be on the bench. You would assume he's going to be in the bench, and he'll probably come on for potential farewell, depending on how the game's going. So it seems that Newcastle are going to stick with him for one more game, and then he is off after Bournemouth, which for me, yeah, I think it's a correct call. Thank you, Miggy, for what you done to the club, but ultimately Newcastle need to move on. Newcastle need to get with the times and get some better players in. But yeah, in terms of Lloyd Kelly, so Eddie Howe did completely dismiss the Lloyd Kelly situation. He said straight away, Kelly hasn't shown any signs of him wanting to go out. Obviously, he's a player that wants to come at the start 11. It hasn't happened yet. Eddie Howe has spoken quite highly of Lloyd Kelly, so it seems to me like Newcastle are not currently willing to sell him, unless, again, something in the background might potentially go our way, and then you maybe could sell a player like Lloyd Kelly. But yeah, it doesn't look like Newcastle is going to get rid of him. Matt Target was one that was kind of floating around over the last couple of days. Again, I haven't heard enough about him yet. I think he's potentially a player Newcastle could let go. It's not what I've been that impressed by, to be honest. I like his loan spell for Newcastle. Then we spent the £12 million on him, and he's always been injured. He's never had any consistent games. I mean, he's not a player I'm not keen on, to be honest. So he's one I could potentially look to get rid of if there's good money in for him again, depending on that. But Craig Hope made an interesting point yesterday. Actually, he spoke about KUBO, of course, the Japanese winger out right for Sociedad, if I'm correct in saying that, in La Liga. So basically, the opportunity's actually arisen for Newcastle, where if they wanted to buy, KUBO's release clause, £50 million, they had to stick down on it, and that's a lot of money. Obviously, Newcastle in this window, where you can tell straight away we're more than halfway in the window, and we haven't looked convincing in terms of trying to buy players in again. It's always been a case of we're going to sell before you buy, and with Miggy going out the door, there's open a slot for Newcastle to potentially invest in this window, and I feel like it's important to invest in this window as well, because we don't want to leave ourselves without many options in terms of squad depth. KUBO is a player that I've watched a little bit of. I'm not going to lie, I haven't watched him on a consistent basis, but from what I have seen of him, he looks good, KUBO. He just look quite good. Definitely looks like he's going to be an upgrade if he was to come in on our right-hand side. The problem being, though, is that you're talking £50 million, which, if we were going to spend that kind of money, I'd rather go out and get Brian Mbemba. But it depends on whether he would actually suit Eddie Howe's style of player. But when I watch him for Brentford, he's a serious player. I think if Newcastle was to potentially go on for him in the summer, I reckon you probably could get him maybe a little bit more than 50 million, but I think around that region you really could consider yourself getting a player like Mbemba in, because from what I've seen of him, he impresses me a lot. And if Newcastle were to go in and buy anyone in this window, he is most certainly a player we should be keeping an eye on. But the reality is, it's the summer or never with him. We're not going to get him in January. In terms of our options, though, it's just a thing. I've seen some people on my video yesterday come out and say, well, Adam, why are Newcastle not going and getting this player? Why are we not going and get this player? If you honestly look at the transfer window, even in the Premier League over the last few years in January, not much happens in January. I think this FFP and PSR thing has honestly just completely diluted these transfer windows. I think this PSR rubbish has just ruined the excitement of windows. There's not many teams that have went out there and bought players. Obviously, Arsenal's got Zidane in the summer. Aston Villa signed Marin, but other than that, there hasn't really been much activity at all across the leagues. I think Mamouche is going to Manchester City, isn't he? But other than that, there's not much activity at all. It wouldn't, if you were looking at a January transfer window 10 years ago, it was a million times better than what it is now. It's just so diluted. Teams don't want to sell. Teams don't want to buy because of how expensive players are. PSR means if you buy a player now, you'll have to sell in the summer. Oh, it just does my head in. It'll do your head in as well. And that's a lot of reasons why I haven't been critical towards Paul Mitchell, because at the same time, again, Newcastle don't necessarily need to buy. I don't want to be that guy. Because we most certainly need squad depth, but we're in the top four at the minute. Newcastle could get lucky and not get any injuries. I wouldn't want to put ourselves in that situation. But you say like Sir Callum Wilson is expected to be back for the Arsenal game in the semi-final. Again, you guys, if you watch my videos for a while now, you know my thoughts on Wilson. He's a player I do not trust at all. I think he'll get injured straight away again, and I'm hoping that he doesn't. But the reality is, it's what you're going to expect from him now. So Newcastle probably, if they desperately wanted to, probably could ride the storm out into the summer, but it's not a gamble I think we should do. I don't think Newcastle should do that gamble. Even if we're loaning someone, just get somebody in. We've got options there. Let's get some options in. So, yeah, it's a tricky one to talk about. It's a tricky one to get into. But Newcastle at the minute still are not budging. They're not budging at all. And unless there's an amazing deal where they can't turn it down, Newcastle just aren't looking to buy at the minute. So again, I know a lot of you guys will be quite upset or disappointed by that, but I think Newcastle, it requires a lot of luck, but I think we could ride out into the summer if we were to go down that avenue. However, of course, you're talking about Champions League, you're talking about cup finals, you're talking about Newcastle winning something this season. You've got a much higher chance of doing that if we do buy somebody and if we do get some options in. So again, we'll see what Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe does over the next couple of weeks, but at the minute, in terms of incomings, it just doesn't look that way. They give you a truth answer. It just doesn't look that way at all. Again, you've got to sell first before we look at the buy. But yeah, Miggy looks like he's gone after the Bournemouth game. But other than that, there's not much I was still noticed, to be honest. There hasn't been too much in terms of transfer activities. It's just in terms of what players come back into the squad. Nick Pope's coming close to coming back. In my opinion, should not be anywhere near the starting 11 to Bradker's spot until he loses it. Callum Wilson's looking to be back for the second leg of the semi-final. That's about it. It's about it from Newcastle. So we'll see how things go against Bournemouth tomorrow first. That's an important game. Let's focus on Bournemouth. Let's get past Bournemouth, and then, of course, building up to the Southampton game next week, we can then focus on key areas of the pitch, and we'll see whether Newcastle will invest or not. But for me, I'm not going to be whinging or moaning if Newcastle don't invest, because it means we can't invest in the summer. However, it is a dangerous game to play, and Newcastle, I would much rather us go out there and buy someone. But at the same time, I can kind of understand the hesitant approach, and I wouldn't necessarily be upset if we weren't to buy in this window. But we'll see what happens first. Newcastle just need to get those results on the pitch, which we are doing.